Yeah. Um, Thank you for joining my internal comms series on for my blog. This is ongoing series that I do with thought leaders from around the globe. So really appreciate you taking the time and signing in from Hong Kong to share your thoughts. So before we get started, it would be great if you could introduce yourself to our viewers.
First of all, thanks, Anisu, for having me on this series of yours. It's a complete honor to be here with you and share my thoughts on how I perceive internal comms and what's important to me in driving a culture of change around it. So my name is Neha, and you mentioned that earlier. And I started my career actually as a journalist 20 years ago in Tokyo, where I studied Japanese and worked as a financial reporter. And then after doing that for 5 years, I switched my careers in public relations. And since then, I've pretty much worked as a content provider and communicator. And, it's been 15 years. For most part, I've worked in the financial industry, but my last few gigs have been, with a tech company and then an insurance company. Besides Japan, I guess, I'd say I've had the opportunity to work across Hong Kong and Singapore, and now I'm moving to London soon. So thank you once again for having me. Looking forward to this great conversation with you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for introducing. And I really like your career path and the fact that you worked in multiple cultures. And I'm sure that's really what our viewers will really get a lot of insights from. So let's begin by asking you what's your definition of internal communication? So what does it mean to you?
Yeah, so in my view, it's as I said, about driving change, and that's what fascinates me about this. It's an area where you can clearly make an impact. And it's built on this culture of engagement and trust. And how do you achieve that? It's really very simple. It's by creating these connections and communications between employees and top management. So there's, at the end of the day, a shared understanding of a company's goals, aspirations, vision,
Right.
and purpose, really. And
Yeah.
it's not just about, the top down communicating to employees. It's not that top down flow of information. It's
Right.
also about giving your employees that voice, so they
Yeah.
feel empowered. And that's really by seeking their feedback, from time to time, understanding their concerns, and soliciting that information really on what really matters to them. So that's how I really see, internal comms and our role as communicators, really.
Fantastic. And I really like the point about employee voice. And I think that's a element that often gets missed out in organization. So if you could, I know you're between jobs and you have worked in multiple companies and therefore, and you may not want to name the companies, but how does it, what are the nitty gritties or how does it get practiced within these organizations? So what are those elements?
Yeah, I've honestly worked at some really great global organizations, and they've understood the importance of strong internal comms, by keeping things real, transparent. And one thing that many companies don't do is invest in, tools or new ways of engaging with their audience. But I've had the, I guess, good fortune of working at companies who got these things right, and they've understood that communication is two-way. As I said, it's not just about the top management relaying their message to employees, but it's also listening to what employees are saying and reaching out to them in their own terms. And by that, I mean, being inclusive of all, whether that's your permanent employees, your contractors, whether they speak English or not. So, think about languages, and also the cultural nuances, really, right? So, seek honest feedback. That's the only way for you to drive change if you clearly want to do that. another way is, really humanizing the stories, and it's really engaging with the employees in a way that you can simplify a complex subject and really hit a chord with the employees.
Right.
That's, in my view, the only way you're going to invoke an action and
Right.
also see change in behaviors, by telling real stories of people. And then lastly, for leaders, I say, make yourself visible and accessible.
Right.
If you're not engaged and if you're not accessible, you're not going to get the same from your employees. It's
Mhm.
as simple as that, and it's always going to be a two-way thing. So those are the things I think that are very crucial, and I've been blessed to see that in some of the firms that I've worked with.
Fantastic. And in your, I mean, if you reflect on your journey, if there is there any campaign or initiative that comes to your mind which you are really proud of, in terms of what was the challenge you faced, what was the opportunity which came out, how did you go about it?
Yeah, I mean, there are quite a few, of course, in my span of 15 years of doing this, but the one and the most recent and probably the more relevant to, many of us right now is with regards to COVID-19. So,
Right.
in my most recent role, we created a microsite, about COVID-19, and
Right.
it was our way to keep our employees informed of factual information. And this microsite basically hosted a lot of regular updates around COVID, with fast
Yeah.
changing information. It was very important to provide them with facts, and Q&As from and a medical expert. We also provided a lot of well-being related content. I
Mhm.
personally interviewed, life coaches, nutritionists to get really, information from them and seek their views on how best to manage health during these times. So
Mhm.
there was a lot of that kind of content, but we also wrote stories about how our people, our employees, were reaching out to communities in
Right.
this time. We
Yeah.
also, talked about what our company was doing for our people and communities.
Mhm.
And it's something that I'm really, really proud of, because it kind of made me realize, that we're one of those companies that really care about our
Mhm.
stakeholders, our employees' well-being and safety and health were our top priority, and the same goes for our customers, and also what were we trying to achieve for our communities. I mean, these are really important things, and really also help drive engagement, and instilling that sense of pride in your employees. So that's one thing I'm really, really proud of, which comes to mind.
That's great. What I heard was that it's more the empathetic approach you all took towards employees, and how you went ran the business during this time. So fantastic. What's according to you is the biggest challenge internal communicators face?
Yeah, I think we've come a long way from the days where again, it was a top-down only information flow.
Right.
I think now corporates do understand that engaging with employees is important, but they still kind of rely on old and traditional methods of how they're engaging with their employees.
Right.
Most companies still obviously go to intranet, which is
Yeah.
a great channel to host all your information. But I think we need to think beyond that, So reaching employees using the right technology, especially given today's time and age, where majority of your population is the millennials,
Yeah. Yeah.
and they're constantly on their phone for any
Yeah.
sort of information, So providing that easy access to them, and also making sure that we're flexible in our approach,
Right.
in terms of look at newsletters or
Yeah.
sharing videos via emails.
Right.
Those are some easier way to kind of doing things. But again, companies sometimes forget that. So just really one-click access to information
Right.
without employees having to deal with firewall issues or multiple logins. You lose
Yeah.
your audience instantly when you have a layered process, and it's a lost opportunity in my view. So I think companies just need to be a little bit more open to using the right technology and tools.
Fantastic. And related question to that, I mean, what do you see is the biggest opportunity for internal communications today?
Yeah, I think really, and it's again talking about lost opportunities. I think companies forget, that if you engage with the employee in the right way, they could
Mm,
essentially be your brand ambassadors.
right.
If you use the right tools, give them a voice, and create a culture of empowerment, trust.
Yeah.
You're going to have amazing brand advocates. You're going to have lower turnover rates,
Right.
and creating that, network of ambassadors is so crucial and meaningful for all stakeholders. And I think we as internal comms can play such an, sort of meaningful role in shaping that culture. And it doesn't cost the company anything.
Right.
If you have an engaged employee, you can build a strong advocacy, and it's a win-win for all. So it's time we kind of thought about,
Right.
engaging the right way with our audience.
Great. And there is this discussion which always happens saying, internal comms doesn't have a seat at the table. So what are the ways in which internal comms can add more value to the business?
Yeah, I think, the way you can really, really add value is, by basically looking at a few things, right? Just be strict, like tactful and strategic in how you just, and so I think, there's certain natural traits that come to you anyway. So use them to your fullest. And also, I'd say be brave and sign up for challenges. I think, as women, we tend to downplay our achievements, and the skill set that we bring. And it's okay to fail sometimes too. You may not always get it right, but make that your learning experience for the next time you try.
Mm,
Another thing which is very important in comms, and it's for everyone really, is, I would say, be an early adopter of the technology
right.
around you. It's changing so fast,
Yeah.
and it's something that I need to work on as well. So and how do I do that? So I also have a strong network of communicators that I always go to,
Mhm.
and I try to keep myself updated on what's latest, what's working for them, and just
Right.
trying to understand some of that, and see if you can replicate some of what you're hearing about into your company. Lastly, and it's important for anyone in any job, is have a mentor,
Mhm.
who's also a great leader. And by that, I mean someone who actually is your a big advocate,
Right.
right? And they'll encourage you to push boundaries, bring the best in you, and make sure you then pay it forward when you become,
Yeah.
that mentor or leader one day. So those are really some key things, I do for myself. And I would recommend to anyone in this career, that they could use to succeed.
Fantastic. That's great advice. And you alluded to you shared the example of COVID-19 and the crisis, but I just want to understand what do you think is changing and what will change completely for, internal communications related to COVID-19 and any pandemic or any crisis?
Yeah, I mean, I think COVID, as we all know, has changed the ways of working for most of us, and it's kind of forced many companies to look into new ways of working, and how they communicate to employees as well, and I think in times like these, especially crises, our role has become more important than ever, as we help companies navigate through some of these challenges, and enable cross-functional collaboration and build a culture of trust where we empower and engage with our employees and create a positive experience for them, so that their productivity is maintained, morale is still high. And it's very hard, and it was particularly, I think, hard, during this pandemic, because no
Right.
one expected it. I think it's really made internal comms, rethink their approach, in terms of how can we engage better with our employees in effective way,
Right.
while they're working remotely. How do we encourage our employees to connect with each other more? How do we, sort of have our leaders connect more with their subordinates? How do we reduce the level of anxiety and still be able
Yeah.
to maintain that level of productivity and morale? So it's
Mm.
really, made us rethink our comms approach as well. And as I mentioned that example before, we did quickly create a microsite. I think time
Yeah.
is also essence during the time
Right.
of crisis. You need to move really fast, and we created a content hub for information, and it included everything from guidelines to what we were doing, and FAQs in accordance
Mm.
with new information.
Yeah.
Sharing sessions with colleagues. We would have them hosted, the WebEx recordings. So if you couldn't watch it live, then you could go back to it and take, some learning experiences from others. So it's really providing that instant and
Mm.
relevant information to our employees, and help them through this. And also really helping the business, in trying to keep the morale of our employees high. So I think, that's something that, companies need to rethink.
Fantastic. And according to you, what's one trend that you spot currently in internal communications?
Yeah, I think, we're increasingly seeing, I spoke about brand ambassadors,
Mm.
internal influencers, right? And I think, we've come to sort of learn that, that is, crucial to, I guess, the success of any company. And it's great, I think, also content for internal comms, right? Enabling
Mm.
people to share information,
Right.
communicate, and interact actively. It leads to a better culture of collaboration and also exchange of information.
Mm.
And it's, I think, also something that millennials like to do. They love social networking.
Mm.
And they do make a large working population for most companies now. So you cannot not look into that. And they also question the information received from top down. And they want to be heard. So I
Mm.
think, it's something that more and more internal comms teams are looking into, and encouraging more of these internal influencers to actually be the channel of communication
Got
and
it.
the advocate. So I think that's something great to see, and it was time, we saw this change actually.
Great. And as we wrap up, just wanted to ask you if there's one thing you'd like to change, one aspect of internal comms, what would that be?
Yeah, I think change is important, to improve business and to succeed. And I think, with the new norm of more people now working remotely, and
Mm.
companies going through this digital transformation, we communicators, need to change, massively, and
Mm.
looking at, our processes and how we adopt new technology, how we engage with the population, how we communicate more effectively with those, who are working remotely. So investing in, good tracking tools so you can,
Right.
measure your success. I know it's very hard sometimes to actually measure success for internal comms people. So I'd say, invest in that, track data, so you can accordingly, target your communication Yeah, gone are the days, and we spoke about this earlier, Anisu, where you could just have this blanket comms approach for everyone. You need to make sure your content is relevant, the channels used are relevant, and so I think we'll see more of that happening in companies, and I'm actually very excited about that change as well. So yeah.
Thank you. This is fantastic. These are great insights. Thank you for taking the time to do this. Really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Anisu. Thanks so much. I really appreciated being with you. So thanks.
Just hold on.